For many people who are caregivers, this can be really the perfect storm of stress.
Holidays are a time when everything is magnified, the good, the bad, and everything in between. So when you're caregiving, the emotions of caregiving that are always there and the stress of caregiving that's always there is just totally amplified and can be really, really overwhelming for caregivers.
Since most caregivers are women, women are also the ones in charge of making the holidays wonderful for everybody else. So it's just, I guess, an added burden.
I was a primary caregiver for my grandmother, and we lived together. And one of the hardest things for me during the holidays is, I am a yes person, so I like to take on and say yes, and I'll do it, and sign me up. And when you become a caregiver, you have to let some of that go. It got to the point where people would ask, like, well, what are you doing for Christmas? And I would say, well, we're having a very Alzheimer's Christmas. And you? We didn't actually do a lot of celebrating of the holidays in our home because it was so overwhelming and confusing for my grandmother. And so we didn't bring a lot of that into the home. And that was a really hard transition for me to learn.
But you found a way, basically, to deal with it. You found, something that you could do to kind of compensate.
One of the things that I found was my grandmother was really fond of Vienna. And so every year on PBS, they run these fantastic shows from Vienna. And so it was this amazing moment where she would be really resistant to holidays, to something new, what's going on. She didn't understand the change of the season. And yet I could put on this program on PBS and she would be transported into a version of herself where she absolutely knew what Christmas was. She absolutely knew what Vienna was. She would start speaking German. It was so beautiful. And of course, we would record that and try to have a little bit of that moment every day. And that's what you can do, is you can have that little moment of Christmas where you know what your loved one's access point is to the holiday, and you try to find that.
What your story, Dresden, really hits home for me right now because I'm going through the holidays with my dad who lives with me who has Alzheimer's, and my mom just passed away 8 weeks ago. He goes in and out of remembering. The holidays are not quite meaning the same thing to him as you had with your grandmother, and PBS is our best friend, too. Last night I recorded the Mormon Tabernacle Choir Christmas holiday special. I have a bunch of them on there, and that's what he loves the most. As a former music therapist, I, of course, think the music, is the answer, especially with dementia. But it's true that when you can't handle quite as much chaos around the house and the hustle bustle that the holidays have meant to you, things like that, and finding meaning in those moments and focusing on those things that are the most meaningful are, what you have to do. You have to scale back your expectations and grab those moments when you can get them.
These sound like wonderful ways of helping the person you're caring for enjoy the holiday, maybe in a different way, in a different tradition. What do you do about yourselves when you're, where do you find the joy and beauty in the holiday yourself when you're caring for so many people on so many different fronts?
I would take a moment, in the evening and just drive around and look at lights. It brought me some comfort to know that, the world is going on. The earth is still turning and rotating. Just because my life is standing still in this moment, and as a caregiver, everything else is still happening, and Christmas is still happening. It's not happening just because I don't have a tree or I'm not making a pie.
I took my dad to a Christmas concert. He loved that. I love that. I am watching Christmas movies in my bedroom as I go to bed at night, that I can kind of get as much of that as I can. I listen to Christmas music in the car. There's some of those things that I prioritize that make it still seem like Christmas to me. You just have to find those things that speak to you and make it holiday-ish to you.
Christmas also, for me, represents a time to start something new. So even though it's not New Year's, but it's new traditions, try to think outside the grieving and the loss that may now could be associated with Christmas by thinking of it as a time of spirit and abundance. But you have to create it. It takes some creative thought.
New traditions are so important. That's one of the things. I just wrote an article for AARP.org on the holiday caregiver stress and 10 tips, and that was one of them, because you're not going to be able to do all of the old traditions, and so do something new. We went out to eat for Thanksgiving this year because I just couldn't face doing it with my mom. It's very hard to take care of my dad and cook a meal, and so we went out to a Native American museum and ate there and kind of did traditional American Thanksgiving. It was something new, and that sort of distracts you, as you say, Kelly, so well, from the loss.
My grandmother, actually, she passed away in 2009, and I was her caregiver for almost 7 years. And as we progressed into her dementia and her Alzheimer's, we lost so many holidays. First holidays after she passed were hard, were really hard, because it was an empty chair. But then we realized that it was an empty chair and we could build back up. And she would have really liked that because she loved the holidays. So we started folding her back in. We started saying, well, what were some of Millie's favorite foods that she would prepare on the holidays, on Thanksgiving or on Christmas or for my birthday? We've been listening to music from Vienna, and we've been blasting Pavarotti. And this year it feels like she's here with us. And so we're bringing her feeling and stuff into so many of the things that we're doing.
That's a beautiful way to think of it. I think creating new traditions, and in a way I think that's what it's all about. Happy holidays to everybody.